What if the very system designed to protect you in your golden years, the intricate and sophisticated web of modern medicine that promises to be a steadfast guardian of your health, was quietly, almost imperceptibly, harboring a risk you never knew existed? This is not a question born of conspiracy or unfounded fear, but one that emerges from the very heart of scientific inquiry, a concern that bubbles up from the dense pages of medical journals and peer-reviewed studies. Every year, millions of people over the age of 70 dutifully and with the best of intentions attend their routine health checkups, believing they are taking the most responsible steps possible to ensure a long, vibrant, and healthy life. They trust in the white coats, the gleaming machinery, and the authoritative pronouncements of a profession dedicated to healing. But there is a hidden truth, a shocking and deeply unsettling reality buried deep within the bedrock of medical research that your family doctor, however well-meaning, will likely never mention. What if some of the most routine, seemingly innocuous and universally encouraged tests you are persuaded to take could actually be pushing you down a treacherous path toward unnecessary major surgery, a debilitating and life-altering stroke, or even the very cancer they so confidently claim to prevent? This is the paradox of modern defensive and preventative medicine when applied to the unique physiology and life context of an older adult. A paradox where the relentless search for potential problems can, in itself, become the most significant problem of all. It is a world where the desire to do something, to intervene, to fix, can eclipse the profound wisdom of knowing when to do nothing. The data, when examined closely, is not just alarming, it is staggering. New and comprehensive studies, often overlooked in the hustle of daily clinical practice, reveal a statistic that should give us all pause. Up to 37% of all medical tests performed on seniors lead directly to a cascade of treatments, procedures, and prescriptions that are not only medically unneeded, but come with a heavy and often irreversible price of severe complications and lifelong side effects. This is a journey that begins with a simple test, a number on a chart, or a shadow on a scan, and ends with a diminished quality of life that no one ever intended. Even more unsettling, and a testament to the communication gap between medical research and patient awareness, is the fact that an estimated 99% of people over the age of 70 are completely and blissfully unaware that they are being subjected to this pernicious cycle of over-testing and the subsequent over-treatment it so often spawns. They are unwitting participants in a system that sometimes prioritizes action over observation and intervention over patience. Consider one of the most common checkups, a specific type of imaging scan you might be pressured to get under the guise of proactive health screening. It is now believed by a growing number of radioepidemiologists to be a significant contributing cause in up to 5% of all new cancer cases in the United States. To put that figure in perspective, it places the risk associated with this preventative scan on par with the well-documented carcinogenic risk of drinking alcohol every single day. You will not see this information printed on a glossy clinic brochure or displayed on a hospital billboard promoting the latest diagnostic technology. This is the truth that lies buried in the dense, jargon-laden world of science, and today we are digging it up, dusting it off, and bringing it into the light. Here are the 5 health checkups that can do profoundly more harm than good after the age of 70, and the terrifying, well-documented truth about what they can do to your body and your life. The bone density scan, a blueprint for fear. It presents itself as the epitome of sensible, proactive healthcare. The bone density scan, known in medical circles as a dual-energy X-ray absorptiometry or DEXA scan, seems entirely logical and completely harmless. The procedure itself is a model of non-invasive ease. You simply lie on a table for a few minutes while a mechanical arm passes silently over your body. There are no needles, no claustrophobic tubes, no discomforting preparations. You walk out moments later with what you are told is a clear, objective, and scientific picture of your skeletal health, a roadmap to preventing the dreaded hip fracture that haunts the imagination of so many older adults. The scan is designed to measure the mineral density of your bones and detect the presence of osteoporosis, a condition characterized by brittle bones. However, what no one typically explains with the same clarity and emphasis is the complex context surrounding these results, especially for an individual who has lived 7 or more decades. For this population, the test can all too often become an instrument for manufacturing fear and anxiety where none should justifiably exist. As we age, a certain and predictable degree of bone loss is as natural, universal, and expected, a part of the human aging process as the appearance of wrinkles on our skin, the silvering of our hair, or the gradual stiffening of our joints. It is not necessarily a disease state, but rather a reflection of a long life lived. Consequently, the test results for an older adult, particularly a woman post-menopause, will almost invariably show some level of reduced bone density when compared to the benchmark of a healthy 30-year-old, even when there is no immediate, significant, or clinically relevant danger of a fracture. The scan, in essence, pathologizes the normal aging process, turning a natural state of being into a diagnosis that demands action. This is precisely the point where a seemingly harmless scan can trigger a profoundly harmful cascade of medical interventions. A formal diagnosis of osteopenia, a term that describes bone density that is lower than the young adult normal but not yet in the osteoporosis range, often leads to an immediate and reflexive prescription for a class of powerful medications known as bisphosphonates. These drugs, with brand names that have become household words, are designed to slow down the cells that break down bone, thereby strengthening the skeleton. But they carry a heavy and often downplayed burden of potential side effects that can be particularly severe in an older, more fragile body. These can range from severe esophageal irritation, heartburn, and ulcers, which can drastically affect nutrition and quality of life, to a rare but utterly devastating condition known as osteonecrosis of the jaw, ONJ. In cases of ONJ, the jawbone, starved of its blood supply and ability to repair itself, literally begins to crumble and die, a horrific and painful outcome from a medication meant to protect bones elsewhere in the body. The most troubling part of this entire equation is that for many seniors, particularly those in the osteopenia category, these substantial risks are taken for an astonishingly small reward. A landmark multi-year study published in the prestigious Journal of the American Geriatric Society followed thousands of older women and found that after 5 years of continuous treatment, these potent medications reduced the absolute risk of an actual bone fracture in women over 70 by a mere 0.3%. This means that for every 1,000 women who took the drug for 5 years, enduring the cost, the side effects, and the anxiety, only 3 were spared a fracture. In stark contrast, the women in the study were far more likely to suffer from the medication's well-documented side effects, creating a clear imbalance of harm versus benefit. A smarter, safer, and more empowering path often lies in simple, accessible lifestyle modifications. Proven, evidence-based strategies like targeted strength training, which stimulates bone growth by putting gentle stress on the skeleton, balance exercises like Tai Chi, which dramatically reduce the risk of falling in the first place, and ensuring adequate intake of vitamin D and calcium from whole food sources like leafy greens, fortified dairy, and sardines, have been conclusively shown to reduce fracture risk by over 20%, all while improving overall health, mobility, and confidence, empowering the body to protect itself without the looming threat of dangerous and disproportionate side effects. Ask the brain MRI, an unnecessary window into normal aging? The fear of losing one's mind, of the self slowly dissolving into a fog of confusion, is arguably one of the most profound and deeply rooted anxieties of growing older. When those unsettling moments of forgetfulness, the struggle to find a common word, or a brief sense of disorientation in a familiar place become more frequent, the mind immediately and understandably jumps to the worst-case scenarios: dementia, or its most feared form, Alzheimer's disease. This palpable fear creates a powerful demand for answers, for certainty, for a peek inside the skull to see what is going on. In response to this profound patient anxiety and the desire to provide a definitive diagnosis, doctors will often order a brain magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, to look for the underlying cause. But here is the uncomfortable and often unspoken truth. In the vast majority of cases involving mild, gradual age-related memory complaints in individuals over 70, a brain MRI offers no clear answers and can instead open a veritable Pandora's box of heightened anxiety, emotional distress, and a cascade of unnecessary and potentially harmful medical interventions. These incredibly detailed and technologically marvelous scans are excellent at showing the physical structure of the brain. But for most people in their 70s, 80s, and beyond, they simply reveal the predictable and entirely normal topographical changes of a brain that has aged. These findings, such as slight generalized brain shrinkage, cortical atrophy, or the appearance of small white matter spots, leukoariosis, are in most cases the neurological equivalent of gray hair or skin wrinkles, a completely normal, non-pathological part of the aging brain's landscape. They are signs of a life lived, not necessarily of a disease in progress. Once these common and often harmless spots are visualized on a scan and noted in a radiologist's report, however, they are frequently treated not as normal findings, but as ominous portents of cognitive doom. The phrase age-related changes in a report can sound terrifying to a layperson, sparking immense fear and uncertainty. This can trigger a frightening, stressful, and expensive series of follow-up tests, including detailed neuropsychological evaluations, consultations with multiple specialists, and in some cases even highly invasive procedures like spinal taps, lumbar punctures, to test for specific proteins in the cerebrospinal fluid, or in the most extreme scenarios, exploratory brain biopsies. Each of these follow-up steps carries its own significant risks, from infection and headaches to bleeding and the immense psychological burden of undergoing such intensive investigations. A revealing and practice-changing 2021 study published in the journal Neurology Today reviewed the medical records and outcomes of over 3,000 brain scans performed on older adults who presented with only mild, non-debilitating cognitive complaints. The results were stunning. While a remarkable 86% of the scans showed some form of abnormality, according to the radiological reports, a staggering 97% of those findings were ultimately not linked to any actual identifiable or treatable neurological condition. This means that nearly all of these individuals and their families endured the profound emotional turmoil of being told something is wrong with your brain, when in reality, they were simply experiencing the normal physiological process of aging, unless there are clear, severe, and sudden neurological red flag symptoms, such as seizures, a rapid and dramatic personality change, a swift decline in the ability to perform daily tasks like dressing or eating, or new problems with motor control. A simple, non-invasive, office-based cognitive screening test is a far better, more effective, and infinitely less frightening first step. This type of evaluation, which assesses memory, attention, language, and problem-solving skills, provides a real-world, functional assessment of how the brain is actually performing its duties, without the immense risk of false alarms, incidental findings, and the deep-seated, life-altering panic that an ambiguous and over-interpreted MRI scan can so easily create. News. The cardiac stress test, a high-stakes guessing game. For any senior who visits their doctor and mentions feeling a bit more tired than they used to, a vague sense of shortness of breath when climbing stairs, or an intermittent and non-specific feeling of tightness in their chest, the cardiac stress test is one of the most common and reflexively ordered diagnostic tools in the medical arsenal. The procedure, which involves monitoring the heart's electrical activity and blood pressure while a patient walks on a treadmill at increasing inclines and speeds, or is given medication to chemically simulate the stress of exercise, is intended to serve a critical purpose: to identify significantly blocked coronary arteries that could restrict blood flow to the heart muscle and potentially lead to a heart attack. In theory, it is a logical way to unmask a hidden danger. However, For a large population of individuals over the age of 70 who do not have clear, classic and unambiguous symptoms of heart disease, such as crushing chest pain that radiates to the arm or jaw during exertion, this test can become a high-stakes guessing game that frequently does more harm than good. Its primary and most critical flaw lies in its diagnostic accuracy, or more precisely, its significant lack thereof in this specific demographic. Multiple large-scale studies published in leading cardiology journals have shown that in older adults without definitive symptoms, the false positive rate for standard exercise stress tests can be as high as 40%. This means that in nearly half of all cases, the test will sound a loud, terrifying alarm, signaling a serious problem that simply does not exist in reality, sending a perfectly healthy or stable individual down a rabbit hole of invasive and risky follow-up procedures. This false alarm, born from the test's inherent imprecision, sets off a dangerous and often unstoppable chain reaction of medical intervention. A positive or even equivocal stress test result almost automatically leads to a referral for more invasive and definitive follow-up procedures, most commonly a cardiac catheterization, also known as an angiogram. During this procedure, a long, thin tube is threaded from an artery in the wrist or groin all the way up into the heart's own arteries, and a contrast dye is injected to visualize any blockages. These procedures are not without their own substantial risks, which include serious bleeding at the catheter insertion site, damage to the artery, allergic reactions to the contrast dye that can cause acute kidney damage, and, in rare but tragic cases, triggering a stroke or even a heart attack during the procedure itself. Furthermore, if a minor or moderate narrowing is found during the angiogram, a common finding in older adults that may be perfectly stable and not causing any problems, the pressure to fix it is immense. A stent, a tiny metal mesh tube, may be placed to prop the artery open. Yet a major practice-informing 2017 study called the Orbiter trial and subsequent research published in JAMA Cardiology found that for many patients with stable coronary disease and without active limiting symptoms, placing a stent offered no significant improvement in survival, prevention of future heart attacks, or overall quality of life compared to optimal medical therapy with pills alone. Instead of a solution, patients are left with the lifelong need for powerful blood-thinning medications and the consequences of an invasive procedure they likely never needed. For a 75-year-old like Raymond, a retired postman whose story is all too common, a simple complaint of feeling tired on his daily walks up the neighborhood hills led to a stress test, a positive result, a subsequent catheterization, the placement of a stent for a moderate blockage, and a 6-day hospital stay to treat acute kidney problems caused by the contrast dye. His initial fatigue, it was later determined, was most likely due to mild dehydration and being slightly out of shape. For seniors without the classic textbook symptoms of heart disease, a far safer and more rational approach is to start with simpler, less provocative tests like a resting electrocardiogram, EKG, or, if more information is needed, a coronary artery calcium, CAC scan. The CAC scan is a quick, low-radiation CT test that more accurately and directly shows whether dangerous, hardened plaque is building up in the arteries, providing real, actionable answers without pushing you onto the high-speed conveyor belt of risky and unnecessary interventions. Tositsai, the colonoscopy. After 75, when the risks outweigh the rewards, this particular recommendation may come as a significant surprise, as it challenges one of the most deeply ingrained tenets of modern preventative medicine. The colonoscopy is widely and correctly hailed as the gold standard for the prevention and early detection of colon cancer, a truly life-saving procedure that has dramatically reduced mortality from this disease for decades. While it remains an incredibly valuable and highly recommended tool for younger and middle-aged populations, the complex risk-to-benefit calculation shifts dramatically and decisively as we cross the threshold into later life. For most people who have had a history of regular negative screenings, Continuing to undergo routine screening colonoscopies after the age of 75 is not a wise or evidence-based choice, and it is almost never recommended by major medical guidelines for asymptomatic individuals after the age of 80 unless there are specific alarming new symptoms such as unexplained rectal bleeding, a sudden and persistent change in bowel habits, or severe abdominal pain. The reasons for this shift in recommendation are stark, clear, and based on a careful weighing of potential harms against a diminishing potential for benefit. As the body ages, the risks associated with the procedure itself begin to substantially and measurably outweigh the rewards of detecting a slow-growing cancer that may never have caused a problem in a person's remaining lifespan. First, the preparation for the procedure, which is merely an inconvenience for a healthy 50-year-old, can be incredibly harsh and medically dangerous for an older body. The powerful laxatives required to completely clean out the colon, often involving drinking a gallon of unpleasant-tasting solution, can easily lead to severe dehydration. This dehydration can, in turn, cause dangerous electrolyte imbalances, affecting heart rhythm and kidney function, as well as lightheadedness, dizziness, and falls, which can have catastrophic consequences for a senior. Second, the deep sedation or anesthesia required to perform the procedure comfortably poses a greater and more unpredictable risk to the cognitive function of older adults. A significant number of elderly patients experience a period of prolonged post-procedural confusion, delirium, or memory issues that can sometimes persist for weeks or even months, a condition known as post-operative cognitive dysfunction. Finally, the test itself becomes technically more dangerous with age. The wall of the colon can become thinner, more fragile, and less elastic over time, which significantly increases the risk of serious complications during the procedure, such as a perforation, a tear in the colon wall, which is a surgical emergency, significant bleeding from a polyp removal site that may require hospitalization and blood transfusions, or even cardiovascular events like heart rhythm disturbances or drops in blood pressure triggered by the stress of the procedure and sedation. A massive and definitive 2019 study that analyzed the records of over 1.3 million Medicare patients yielded a sobering and clarifying ratio. For every 1,000 screening colonoscopies performed on asymptomatic patients over the age of 75, only an estimated 2 lives were saved from colon cancer over the following decade. During that same period, however, over 20 people in that same group suffered a serious procedure-related complication requiring hospitalization. That is a 10-to-1 ratio of tangible harm to potential benefit, a calculus that argues strongly against routine screening in this age group. For healthy asymptomatic individuals who have reached this stage of life, a far safer, more proportionate, and still highly effective alternative is a non-invasive, at-home stool-based test, such as the fecal immunochemical test, FIT. It requires no dietary restrictions, no harsh prep, no sedation, and carries zero risk of procedural complications, yet it is highly effective at detecting the presence of hidden blood, a key indicator of the most concerning and advanced cancers, making it a much smarter and more patient-centered choice when the ultimate goal is to live a long and healthy life, not simply to undergo another procedure for its own sake. Tamawat Sano, the full-body CT scan, a dose of danger in disguise. We have now arrived at the most egregious, most misleading, and potentially the most dangerous checkup of all, a product of commercialized medicine that preys directly on our deepest fears of hidden illness. Often marketed in slick, expensive executive health packages at private for-profit clinics, the full-body computed tomography, CT scan, is promoted as the ultimate proactive health tool, a futuristic high-tech way to scan your entire body from head to toe and catch any lurking cancer or abnormality at its absolute earliest stage. It is sold with the promise of total reassurance and complete control over your health destiny. The truth, however, is not just counterintuitive, it is frankly terrifying. These scans, which are essentially a series of hundreds of X-rays stitched together by a computer, expose your body to a massive and medically significant dose of ionizing radiation. A single full-body CT scan delivers a radiation dose that is roughly equivalent to receiving approximately 500 standard chest X-rays all at once, or the amount of natural background radiation you would absorb over several years. For an older adult whose cells may be less efficient at repairing radiation-induced DNA damage, this dose is far from trivial. The supreme and frightening irony is that there is absolutely zero credible scientific evidence from any major medical organization in the world to suggest that these general untargeted shotgun approach scans actually save lives or improve health outcomes in people who do not have any specific symptoms of a disease. The real and immediate danger of a full-body CT scan lies not just in the radiation, but in its profound and almost guaranteed ability to find incidentalomas, a medical term for tiny, harmless, and clinically insignificant nodules, cysts, calcifications, or other anatomical variations that are nothing more than the benign signatures of a long and well-lived life. They are the body's equivalent of barnacles on an old ship. But the moment these meaningless specks appear on a high-resolution scan, a bright red flag goes up, setting in motion a devastating and predictable cycle of intense anxiety, more targeted and often higher radiation, follow-up scans, referrals to a litany of specialists, and all too often, invasive and risky needle biopsies to determine the nature of a finding that was harmless to begin with. An 80-year-old martial arts instructor named Marcus, who felt perfectly healthy and was still actively teaching, was convinced by his children to get one of these executive scans for peace of mind. The scan revealed a tiny 4mm nodule in his lung, a finding present in a huge percentage of older adults. This led to a follow-up PET scan and ultimately a needle biopsy of his lung, a procedure that resulted in a pneumothorax, a collapsed lung. He was hospitalized, required a chest tube for several days, and endured a painful 2-month recovery that severely limited his physical activity, all for a nodule that was ultimately confirmed to be a benign old scar. The most shocking finding of all, which underscores the public health risk of this trend, comes from a 2023 modeling study, published in a leading radiological journal. It projected that the recent explosion in the use of diagnostic CT scans, including these screening scans, may now be responsible for up to 5% of all cancers diagnosed in the country. This means that a test marketed aggressively for cancer prevention could be causing as many cancers as a well-known and potent carcinogen like daily alcohol consumption. The official position of the American College of Radiology and other major medical bodies is unequivocal and absolute. Full-body CT scans should never be used for general screening in asymptomatic individuals. A safer, wiser, and more medically sound approach is to listen carefully to your body and investigate specific persistent symptoms with targeted, appropriate imaging when warranted. Searching your entire body with a powerful CT scan is like searching for a lost wallet in your house with a lit stick of dynamite. You might by some small chance find what you are looking for, but the collateral damage could be infinitely worse than the original problem. Your health is, without question, your most precious and irreplaceable asset, and the marvels of modern medicine represent one of humanity's greatest achievements, a powerful and essential ally in our quest for a long and well-lived life. But true health wisdom, especially as we accumulate decades of life experience, lies not in reflexively doing every test available or pursuing every abnormality to its most invasive conclusion, but in developing the discernment to choose a path that prioritizes your genuine quality of life over the mere quantity of medical procedures. The single most important and empowering question you can ask your doctor before agreeing to any test is always, and what happens next? If the test is positive, what is the next step? And the step after that? If a screening test is likely to lead to a cascade of further interventions that carry more concrete risks than potential rewards, it may be time to pause, to breathe, and to reconsider. Real, meaningful prevention as we age begins not in a scanning machine, but with the conscious and consistent choices you make every single day. Staying physically active in ways you enjoy, nourishing your body with wholesome food, protecting your sleep, nurturing your social connections, and most importantly, becoming a wise, informed, and courageous advocate for your own health. The goal is not to defy aging, but to embrace it with intelligence, grace, and a clear-eyed understanding of what truly contributes to a life of vitality and joy.